Indiana pulls arguably the biggest name in the transfer portal, at least in the last couple of weeks, and they've got their starting center. But does that mean they're ready for a Big Ten title push? Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers is here to answer that very question. So Coogan started this year at Notre Dame. He wasn't supposed to going into the year. Guy in front of him gets hurt. He starts, and as you can imagine, for the national runners-up, Jacob, it goes very well. But the guy who was ahead of him on the depth chart is going to return. That's not going to allow him to play. So he hits the portal, lands at Indiana, and this feels like a bona fide starting center, right? There's no other reason he would go to another power program.
Yeah, I mean he's going to step in and take the spot of a guy at Indiana who is leaving, is gone, is not having any eligibility anymore. He's graduating, and so you bring in Coogan, who, as you said, was not supposed to start, but started the last 13 games for them and helped them be one of the best offenses in the country, especially one of the best rushing offenses in the country, with, of course, Jeremiah Love and a couple of other backs at Notre Dame who are really, really good. So, yeah, I think he steps in immediately. And the fact that Indiana was in the mix for a guy like this and he left Notre Dame to come to Indiana is a really, really big deal. I think behind Fernando Mendoza, this is the biggest portal pickup for Indiana this offseason rather, because you desperately needed help. We saw against Ohio State and against Notre Dame, the trenches, we got obliterated. We just got smashed. We didn't have the dudes to hang with some of those teams. Well, now you go get some of those dudes and put them on your team. So, yeah, I think he's the starting center in 2025.
Does this change your outlook for Indiana's ability to reach the Big Ten championship game next year, or at least be in that discussion and return to the playoff?
I think him and the combination of guys like Mendoza that I talked about, stays the tight end from Tennessee. You also have two other offensive linemen, one from Ohio State, one from Colorado. Plus, you bring in a ton of secondary guys on the defensive side, and you bring back your two best receivers and your two All-Americans on defense. Yeah, I think you got better this offseason if you're Indiana from what you did in the transfer portal. You didn't lose a ton. You lose some to graduation. You lose some to the portal. Everybody does. I think we got better overall for a team that just made the college football playoff. Did we make the Big Ten championship? No, but how much does that really matter nowadays, Spencer? With the expanded playoff, I think Indiana should be a 10-win team next year, given the schedule we have and the talent that we have, and that very well may be good enough to get us right back to the playoff.
That's a daunting task, and I say that for two reasons. Number one, schedule, which was a big subject of discussion for Indiana this year, and they took it on the chin after the opening round loss to Notre Dame and how quickly it got out of hand, and they scrapped their way back into it. But, who cares? It was a blowout and such, and then we just overlooked, everybody else who that happened to. But they were the poster child for that because their schedule was really weak. Well, you don't have that in 2025. They have to go to Oregon. That's tougher, aside from Ohio State, than any game that they played this past season, and it's not the only tough game that they have on their schedule. But another reason that I kind of have my ears perked up at Indiana and say, boy, I feel like they can get to 10 wins. I don't see 11 here. Curtis Rourke this past season was awesome. And when he had to miss a game, Jackson, of course, stepped in against Washington, did a really good job. I think Fernando Mendoza is solid, capable, starting caliber guy in the Power 4 level. I don't think he's as good as Curtis Rourke this past year. Am I crazy for thinking that?
No, I don't think so. I think he can become that good because I think Curtis Rourke was one, when you go and get him from Maction, right, from Ohio, nobody really knew who he was. Curt Cignetti did.
I did.
Oh, you did? You knew?
Big Maction guy over here.
Big Tuesday.
Maction supporter.
Guy? Yeah.
Across the board.
Boy. And the guy was a stud in Maction in Ohio as the Bobcats. And Curt Cignetti knew who he was, and he found a diamond in the rough. And I've said, if Curtis Rourke doesn't get injured, I think he's sitting in New York for a Heisman ceremony. He doesn't win, but I think he's there and deserved a shot at that. You go get somebody in Fernando Mendoza who, unfortunately, will probably have to live up to those expectations because Indiana fans are going to be like, well, if Curtis Rourke can do it from Ohio, why can't Mendoza do it from Cal? He did it to an SEC team last year. Why can't he do it in the Big Ten? And I think the expectations will be there, and I think the potential is there. But my thing is, you shouldn't need him to be that good. Curtis Rourke will go down numbers-wise as one of the best quarterbacks to ever play at Indiana, which is a crazy thing to say, but it's true. I'm saying let's not need that. Let's not have to go to that extreme for Indiana to be a good football team. And with everything that you've built around Mendoza now, all those pieces I talked about a second ago, I don't think he has to be. And I think that's okay. If he lives up to that, great. That's awesome. Indiana will probably be a playoff team if that's the case. But he just has to be really good. And I think this system that Indiana runs will allow him to be comfortable, play his style, and win Indiana football games.
If you wanted to make an argument against what I just casted in terms of skepticism towards the Hoosiers, Jacob, I think it would go like this. You had I believe, MAC Player of the Year in DeQuan Finn go to Baylor in the Big 12, which is not as good or as tough of a conference as the Big 10. And by the end of the season, it was very clear, even before that, DeQuan Finn is not the guy. Sawyer Robertson is the future of Baylor football, and he wasn't able to make that jump. So maybe it's more Cignetti than anything else. Maybe it's the offense that he's got. It worked, of course, very well at JMU in the years prior to his arrival in Bloomington, and maybe he elevates Mendoza there, but there's still such a fair amount of turnover. But I do wonder, and when they added Coogan, the center we were talking about from Notre Dame, I wondered, Jacob, is this a team that can now run the ball a little bit more and not need Fernando Mendoza to be Curtis Rourke? Is that something you feel the Hoosiers, personnel-wise, are more capable of doing this upcoming season than they were this past year?
I hope so. I really do. And I think so. And that's kind of what I was getting at is you don't want to put it all on Mendoza, your quarterback, and whoever the quarterback is. I think we will run the football more. I think Indiana has that opportunity with Coogan as your starting center. Again, the Notre Dame offensive line was one of the best in the country, and they had a 1,000-yard rusher, a 900-yard rusher, and a 700-yard rusher on the same team. So Indiana should be able to do something similar, not to the extent of Jeremiah Love. The guy was an animal, but Indiana should be a run-first offense in 2025, and that will open everything up. We've seen Mendoza, when he has to make the throws, he can. When he needs to make the plays, he does. And I think if you're a run-first offense, which I think Indiana will be, Coogan allows you to do that. I think that will take a ton of pressure off of Fernando Mendoza, and he's going to have more talent around him this year than he's ever had at the college level. So everything should be clicking on all cylinders for Indiana. Tino Sunseri's not there. The quarterback's coach who's now at UCLA. I think that's still a big deal. Indiana replaced him with the passing game coordinator from the Atlanta Falcons. I think it's a great hire. But yes, Indiana will be a running team first in 2025. And if they're not, it could get ugly.
Cal was not completely void of talent on offense. You can look at the coaching staff and definitively say he's upgraded there, and maybe that elevates Mendoza. But Cal did not have a shortage of weapons on the outside. Guys like Isaiah Hunter or Jay Knott in the backfield, they had some playmakers. So I don't think this is him going from, oh my gosh, there's nothing around him, to all of a sudden he's got an embarrassment of riches. I don't think it's a Will Howard level jump where he's going from Kansas State to what Ohio State was this past year. And Kansas State was good, but not great. And Ohio State had the best weapons in all of college football this past season. But you really,
it's an upgrade. I'm with you. He's not going from Miami of Ohio to Alabama, but he is upgrading, and he has more experienced weapons. Again, the two leading receivers, Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper from last year's Indiana's team, are coming back for another year. And now you're beefing up your offensive line with 3 Power 4 transfers that I think will start, plus 2 returning starters. I mean, that in itself, I think, is an upgrade from what he had at California. Jay Knott was great. I just think he's got an upgrade all together, I guess, in one as a unit on the offensive side of the football. I think Mendoza's upgrading.
Yeah, Coogan's got to be really good. That Cal offensive line over the last couple of years was not it.
Horrible.
Was absolutely not it. So in that area, I agree. We'll see about everything else. Jacob Goins, Locked On Hoosiers, great as always. Oklahoma has had a wild 48-72 hour, however many it has been, and Brent Venables is going full Thanos.